My name is Donovon Spencer, and I'll be talking today about chaotic taxi networks, specifically in South Africa. And so I'll be talking a little bit about what they are and kind of where they came from. So my full topic, as you can see here on the screen, is South Africa's public transport systems are often incredibly haphazard and potentially unsafe. Why did these systems develop the way they did? So to start out, I wanted to give just a brief history about how or why the taxi network in South Africa is the way that it is. So in South Africa, the majority of transport, not just public transport, but the majority of transport is provided by taxis like this one. There is a huge amount of them, and most of the cars, maybe not most, but a lot of the cars you see on the street are these kinds of taxis. And people take them all the time, all over the place. And today in South Africa, there are over 250,000 taxis currently in service. But it wasn't always like this. In fact, before 1987, this kind of transport was virtually illegal because of apartheid and some of the other things that were happening there in South Africa. But we've seen a huge growth, and I wanted to try to explain some of that based on these two geographic concepts. We have rapid population growth and urbanization and migration. So with rapid population growth, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the population in South Africa. It's growing very rapidly, like many nations in Africa. Not quite as much as some other ones, but still very fast. In 1987, when this taxi service was starting to be implemented, there were 34 million people in South Africa. And today, what is it, 33 years later, there are now 58 million people living in South Africa. That's about 70% more than there were back then. That's a huge amount difference. And it's been happening so fast, and that rapid expansion has created a huge demand for transportation for all these people. Not only has the population been increasing very fast, but we can also look at increased urbanization and migration to large cities. So this image in the background is part of Pretoria there in South Africa. And this is a shack kind of village. So it's part of the city, but it's kind of off by itself. And this is where poor populations have expanded and started setting up shop because they couldn't afford to live anywhere else, really. There are many people that live here. They're very tightly packed together, and these people often can't afford cars. In fact, they can almost never afford cars. And so for them to be able to get to their jobs and to get to school and all these other things, they need to be taking these public transportation networks. And because these places are growing so fast, again, the demand for cheap and affordable transportation is huge. In Pretoria, in 1987, there were 819,000 people. Today, there are over 2.5 million people. So that's just another example of huge growth, which led to this huge demand for taxi networks. Because this demand was so big and so rapid over such a short period of time, and combining that with a lack of strict regulation from the government, these taxi systems have grown pretty much unchecked. To go along with this, I wanted to give a few facts about African taxi systems that I think are just crazy. They blow my mind. So 69% of households in South Africa use taxi systems. 69%. That's crazy. Even families that have cars often use these taxi networks because it's so cheap. It's usually between $1 and $2 for a ride to the other side of town. And so it's cheaper and more efficient than using their own car if they have one. And then taxi usage has increased 25% in the past 5 years alone. And this is a trend that we've seen since they started becoming more popular after being legalized in 1987. The demand for these taxi networks increases and increases and increases. And as we see more people in these urban centers, this demand continues to increase. 75% of travel to work, school, and university is by taxi. 75%. It's crazy. And there are over 15 million trips on taxis every day. So we can see this huge demand because of rapidly expanding populations, because of rapidly expanding cities, and that has led to a crazy, large, and effective but cheap and crazy system that we see in South Africa today.